Hey there, welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, Kamala Harris sits down for the first interview of her campaign.
Meanwhile, Tim Walz defends exaggerating his military service.
And Donald Trump makes some controversial comments on abortion. All right, well, after nearly 40 days, Vice President Kamala Harris finally sat down for her first interview last night. Alongside her running mate, Tim Walz, Harris spoke in a pre-recorded interview with CNN's Dana Bash. Here's a bit of what that looked like.
If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward.
Now, perhaps the most notable moment was when Harris was asked about her repeated flip-flops on various policy positions, such as her walking back calls for a fracking ban, Medicare for all, and mandatory gun buybacks.
I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed.
Now, Donald Trump was quick to jump on those comments, namely, my values have not changed. His campaign posted a statement saying, quote, Kamala Harris confirms she's still radical left. She's her radical left self. Another important moment came later in the interview when Harris was asked if she has any regrets about defending President Biden's mental fitness now that he's stepped out of the race.
You were a very staunch defender of President Biden's capacity to serve another 4 years. Right after the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have served with President Biden for almost 4 years now, and I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career, truly.
Harris said Biden has the, quote, intelligence, the commitment, and the judgment and disposition that the American people rightly deserve in their president.
And Harris's vice presidential pick, Tim Walz, was also asked to clarify his military record, to which he responded that he's only human and that his 40-year public service record, that is, speaks for itself.
First of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools.
When CNN's Dana Bash pressed him on his falsely claimed combat experience, Walz said his grammar is not always correct.
The idea that you said that you were in war. Yeah. Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog. I'm not going to do that. And the one thing I'll never do is I'll never demean another member's service in any way. I never have, and I never will.
Walz had received much flack for embellishing his National Guard status after information came forward that he retired from the military right before his unit deployed to Iraq in 2024. That's when Walz chose to go into politics instead. Overall, Walz's interview lasted no longer than 10 minutes, with the majority of questions going to Vice President Harris instead.
And at the same time, Trump also had his opportunity to speak on some policies yesterday, focusing specifically on abortion. FISM's Ian Patrick has more.
Former President Trump is once again turning heads with some comments he made about abortion and IVF procedures. Following a rally in Potterville, Michigan, NBC News asked Trump about his thoughts on IVF. Trump responded saying that if he were elected, he would look to have the treatment paid for by either the government or insurance companies.
We are going to be, under the Trump administration, we are going to be paying for that treatment. So we are paying for that treatment.
All
or
Americans
we're going,
who want it?
Or for all Americans that get it, all Americans that need it. So we're going to be paying for that treatment, or we're going to be mandating that the insurance company pay.
This comes as Democrats accuse Trump of trying to get rid of IVF. A recent statement from the Harris campaign claims that, quote, Trump's own platform could effectively ban IVF and abortion nationwide. The statement further claimed that IVF is already under attack in the nation due to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But ironically, such an accusation not only flies in the face of Trump's comment, but also is contradictory to the Republican Party's 2024 platform. According to that platform, quote, we believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights. After 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people. We will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. Now, Trump has actively sought to cement his image as a supporter of the fertility treatment. This especially became apparent after Alabama ruled that frozen embryos used in the treatment were legally considered to be children. It should be noted that IVF was not prohibited in the state after that ruling, but it did mean the process would have to be adjusted. IVF isn't universally popular with the pro-life camp either for the way that it handles embryonic disposal. Still, Trump called out the ruling and asked lawmakers to find a workaround. But that position wasn't the only talking point from the interview. When asked about abortion in his home state of Florida, Trump shockingly said that he would vote for something, quote, more than 6 weeks.
In Florida, the state that you are a resident of, there's an abortion-related amendment on the ballot to overturn the 6-week ban in Florida. How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I think the 6 week is too short. It has to be more time, and so and I've told them that I want more weeks.
So you'll vote in favor of the amendment?
I'm voting that I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. I believe in exceptions for life of the mother. If you look, incest, rape.
Now, this was quickly interpreted as Trump saying he wanted abortion up until birth for the state, but his campaign later clarified that the former president has not yet said how he will vote on the ballot initiative in Florida. He simply reiterated that he believes 6 weeks is still too short. But some in the pro-life camp were disappointed to hear that the Republican candidate wanted to extend any sort of timing for abortion. The fact that this also comes after he said his administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights have many worried that he's effectively trying to play both sides of the issue. This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
And lastly, before a quick break here, the U.S. Army issued a statement criticizing Trump for his politics at the Arlington National Cemetery on Monday. While the 2021 Kabul airport victims' family supported the president and wanted him there, critics saw the situation as disrespectful. The U.S. Army wrote in a statement that, quote, participants in the August 26 ceremony and the subsequent Section 60 visit were made aware of federal laws, Army regulations, and DoD policies, which clearly prohibit political activities on cemetery grounds. An ANC employee who attempted to ensure adherence to these rules was abruptly pushed aside. Section 60 is a highly restricted zone where largely soldiers who served in Iraq and Afghanistan are buried. However, since the Arlington National Cemetery employee did not press charges against Trump's campaign team, the matter is considered closed by the Army. And up next, we get some updates from the UN, which is secretly worried about another Trump presidency. The details after this.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. The call to surrender to Jesus is one step in our growth in holiness. And it doesn't just mean you give over a few things. It means He gets it all, including our finances, our investments. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today. Learn more by going to financialissues.org/join. That's financialissues.org/join.
Saving the unborn is one of the most amazing things that we can do in this day and age. Hi, my name is Shanna Burt, host of Financial Issues. Would you go to preborn.org right now? Consider giving $140. That will allow 5 young mothers to hear the heartbeat of their baby and change their mind to choose life over abortion. Go to preborn.org. That's preborn.org. It's an incredible ministry, Preborn. We're fighting back through saving tens of thousands of lives. And Preborn doesn't just save the baby. They ask these young mothers to go through a program of evangelism so that their eternal lives might be saved as well. Would you come alongside us for the kingdom, for the glory of Christ? Go to preborn.org. That's preborn.org.
Welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue with our international coverage. According to leaked audio by Steven Crowder's Mug Club, the United Nations is terrified of a second Trump presidency. Associate Legal Officer at the UN and self-proclaimed globalist Jorge Paoletti revealed during a conversation with an undercover reporter that he wasn't sure the United Nations is going to survive a second term for Donald Trump. Paoletti said that Trump's America First policies would undermine the UN's globalist agenda.
I'm not sure the UN is going to survive a second term thing.
Why do you say that?
Because the purpose of Donald Trump is to end the international institutions that somehow level the playing field. He wants America first.
He also shared that one of the objectives of the UN is to create an identity of a global citizen, someone who shares a political identity with everybody on this planet. He said it's a threat to the absolute power of the United States because Americans don't want an institution over them telling them what to do. The U.S. funds over 20% of the UN's budget, making America powerful in negotiations. Paoletti fears that Trump will resist UN globalist initiatives should he become president again.
And at the same time, the UN also announced a small ceasefire in Gaza this week in order to distribute polio vaccines, as it was recently discovered that an infant contracted the first case of polio in Gaza in 25 years. The vaccination effort is scheduled to begin on Sunday in central Gaza, where Israeli forces have agreed to pause their advance from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. The ceasefire is expected then to last at least 3 days, with a possible extension if needed, according to the WHO. The pauses are scheduled to occur in phases, beginning in central Gaza, then moving to the south, and then ending in the north. The WHO hopes to achieve a 90% vaccination rate in order to prevent a global spread of the virus, and is planning to vaccinate 260,000 children across the Gaza Strip.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces killed local commander of the Islamic Jihad movement of the second day of the operations in the West Bank. Mohammed Jaber, also known as Abu Shuya, led Iranian-backed militants in a refugee camp. He became a Palestinian hero earlier this year when he attended his own funeral after an alleged death during combat. It's a stunt that won't happen again, as is the Islamic Jihad confirmed the commander's death in the city of Tulkarm. He was one of the five fighters who was killed outside a mosque, and in all, the Israeli military says it's killed 17 militants since the West Bank operations began on Wednesday.
And turning our attention now briefly to South America, where Venezuela's opposition leader could be arrested today if he fails to appear in court, which seems highly unlikely. Edmundo Gonzalez previously ignored 2 requests to appear before prosecutors after challenging the results of the country's presidential election. Although communist dictator Nicolas Maduro has officially been declared the winner, polling data and leaked election results seem to show Gonzalez is the actual winner. Much of this data comes from Gonzalez himself, who has since declared himself the actual winner with the backing of the U.S. Maduro has publicly called for his arrest, accusing him of instigating violent protests in the wake of the election. At least 25 people have been killed and over 2,400 arrested.
At the same time, earlier this week, a Hong Kong court convicted 2 former members of the press after they were accused of being too critical of the Chinese government. Yesterday, the court convicted former editor-in-chief of Stand News, Chung Pui-kyun, and former acting editor-in-chief Patrick Lam. Stand News, known for being an opposition outlet, was forcefully shut down by the Hong Kong government in 2021 after Chung and Lam were accused of sedition. Both men were charged with conspiracy to publish and reproduce seditious publications in what many saw as a case surrounding freedom of the press in Hong Kong. Their convictions mean they now face up to 2 years in prison and a $640 fine. The holding company for Stand News was also charged with sedition and convicted alongside Chung and Lam. The company was not allowed to have any representatives at the trial that began more than 2 years ago. The Hong Kong court ruled that Stand News was a tool for smearing Beijing and the Communist Party appointed government during the 2019 protests.
And before we go to a break, Typhoon Shanshan struck Japan's southwestern island of Kyushu yesterday, making landfall with maximum sustained winds of, get this, over 150 miles per hour, placing millions of people under evacuation orders as a result. At least 3 people are now confirmed dead because of the storm. It has since weakened down and slowed to a crawl as it moves across the northern part of the country, dumping record rainfall along the way. Most flights have been suspended due to the storm, and thousands of people are currently without power. All right, and we have plenty more news coming up next. We'll be right back after a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, in the annals of history, there are several places, people, and events that have reached legendary status. We've talked about many of them on this show, even as many people question the legitimacy of their existence in the first place. One of these stories places an alleged ancient island paradise somewhere in the Great Ocean and possibly once existed as a hotbed of precious metals, with many stories alleging the island was teeming with gold. That is, until its faithful and mysterious disappearance sometime in the ancient world. This island, whether mere legend or a true historical paradise, has captured the fancy of historians for thousands of years. That would be the mythical island of Atlantis. Now, Atlantis' first big appearance on the pages of history was in the writings of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who described it as a mighty ancient island kingdom teeming with natural resources near the Strait of Gibraltar in the Atlantic Ocean, right where the Atlantic Ocean meets the Mediterranean. Now, according to Plato's writings, and this was somewhere in the 3rd or 4th century BC, the island kingdom existed some 900 years before him, pegging its existence around the year 9300 BC. The island was prosperous, teeming with gold, but according to Plato, the kingdom sank into the ocean and disappeared when its inhabitants, powerful ancient aristocrats, became exceedingly wicked. Now, since Plato's day, the island became a legend of epic proportions, especially in Europe, when in the later Middle Ages, Europeans discovered the works of Plato, or rather rediscovered them, and believed to be able to find this island. Now, this is in part the foundation for the intense seeking of gold in the New World that many Europeans exhibited in the 16th century during the Age of Exploration, with many of them searching for an Atlantis-like paradise in the New World, or even the lost island of Atlantis itself. Now, this begs the question, did Atlantis really exist? Well, my opinion might surprise you. I believe there's a good chance that it did. Now, we have to make some clarifiers, of course. I believe the Earth is only several thousand years younger than what Plato put forth, meaning he was off by a few millennia in his research. Nevertheless, I want you to notice the legend that Plato describes is an island full of wicked, powerful people who, in their wickedness, were sucked into the heart of the sea and lost forever. Does that sound familiar to you? It should. The legend of Atlantis can absolutely be justified to line up with the biblical account of the Noahic flood, where, because of the thoughts and inclinations of mankind being only evil all the time, God sent a worldwide flood to destroy them. In the Platonic legend, Atlantis sinks into the ocean. Did it really sink into the ocean, or did it, by the sovereign hand of Almighty God, get obliterated by an oceanic flood? In Noah's day, there were many ancient kingdoms who were powerful and wicked, and all of them were swallowed up by the sea of God's wrath. Who's to say that the ancient Atlantis was not one of these? Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
When a woman experiences an unplanned pregnancy, she's faced with a difficult decision. Preborn connects with life-affirming pregnancy clinics across the nation and provides them with free ultrasound sessions for expectant mothers. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears their heartbeat, it doubles the chance she'll choose life. Visit preborn.com/life to save a baby's life.
Hey there, and welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We begin this segment now with some, frankly, not so shocking news coming out of California, where the state legislature this week passed a new law banning local governments from requiring voter ID in their elections. The law comes in response to moves by the city of Huntington Beach to require voter IDs for local elections starting in 2026. Democrat State Senator Dave Min, who authored this week's bill, claims that voter ID laws only, quote, subvert voter turnout and create barriers to law-abiding voters. He also said, quote, to register to vote in California, voters already are required to provide their driver's license number, California identification number, or the last four digits of their social security number. Now, Republicans tried to introduce an amendment to this bill explicitly banning illegal immigrants from voting, as they're still able to secure state ID numbers in California. However, that amendment ultimately failed to pass.
And elsewhere, a new study shows that Americans have spent $150 billion in taxpayer money on the migrant crisis. A study from the Federation for the Immigration Reform, or FAIR, revealed that most of the funds came from state and local governments. For instance, Massachusetts Republicans are accusing their Democrat-controlled government of quietly poking a $1 billion hole in state funds this past year. The state Republican Party now demands a release of Massachusetts' full budget spent on migrants. They say residents deserve to know how their taxes dollars are spent. The party told Fox News that the government withheld critical information on 600 incidents involving police, fire, and EMT. Blocking journalists at every turn, the administration has obstructed the flow of information to the public. Of course, Massachusetts isn't alone in its migrant spending crisis. California got hit the hardest this past year with $30 billion in migrant funding through taxpayer money. Texas came second with almost $13.5 billion, and New York was third with close to $10 billion in taxpayer funds.
And all this comes as the Biden administration is now resuming an updated version of its migrant sponsor program after a brief pause earlier this year over fraud concerns. Back in July, the U.S. halted a 2-year permit program for people coming from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and that was due to fraud concerns from their financial sponsors specifically, as reported by Axios. Now, under the new updated program, those seeking to sponsor migrants will now have to submit fingerprints as part of the review process, and in addition, financial and criminal records of potential sponsors will also be examined much more closely. This comes as the program is currently facing legal challenges from Texas along with 20 other states. They argue the program oversteps the Biden administration's authority and on top of that is just too costly for the states.
Meanwhile, the FBI is under fire after an internal watchdog report found that they are continuing to mishandle child sex abuse cases. It comes 3 years after the agency failed to investigate USA Gymnastics physician Larry Nassar. In the new audit, the Inspector General found that agents missed responding to 42 cases marked for immediate attention. That's a staggering 12% of the cases he reviewed. The auditors also noted a failure to report cases to local law enforcement and to follow its own policies. They noted a lack of staffing, highlighted by one agent assigned to 60 cases at the same time. The FBI says it is learning from its mistakes and will implement the watchdog's recommendations. However, lawmakers call the report damning and outrageous. Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat, is calling for a hearing next month.
Very disturbing news, and this is on top of reports we've heard separately about the sexual abuse and other horrific things happening to the migrant children who are being brought into the U.S.
Yeah, and a lot of them are being lost, and who knows where they end up. So it's a very concerning issue,
Exactly. And finally, before we wrap up today's show, the state of Oregon is in for a pretty major reversal this weekend, as now starting on Sunday, September 1st, the state will officially recriminalize drug possession. This comes as back in April, Governor Tina Kotek signed a new bill reversing a measure enacted 3 years ago, making personal possession of hard drugs, including heroin and even meth, punishable with only a small fine. Earlier this year, state lawmakers from both parties worked together to pass a new law reversing that earlier law, citing soaring deaths specifically from fentanyl.
Some people have complained that this is too complicated to do in a short session. I would say normally true, but it's also an emergency, which is another reason that short sessions exist, because when 3 or 4 Oregonians a day are dying because of addiction, I think it's incumbent upon the legislature to try to act and stem the tide of that happening.
As I said, that law now goes into effect on Sunday. That's September 1st. Once that does go into effect, personal possession of drugs can now result in up to 6 months in jail. So this must be a real problem if even Oregon, probably one of, if not the most liberal states in the entire country, is saying, this really is a problem.
Yeah, they're learning the hard way that it's better to crack down on smaller crimes, so-called smaller crimes, than only concentrate on the bigger ones.
Because it can quickly spiral out of control, and there are very negative repercussions.
All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for more updates over the weekend, be sure to check us out on social media at FISM News, or you can download the FISM app right to your smartphone. Thanks so much. God bless. We hope you have a wonderful Labor Day, and we'll see you on Tuesday with more news coverage.